I'm Harper. I'm 36. And on the night of my birthday, my sister brought me a cake that told the truth louder than any of us ever had. We were at a restaurant my mother loved. One of those cozy places with exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and tiny rosemary plants tucked into every corner like they were trying to prove something. It felt curated, intimate, the kind of setting where silence clinks louder than glasses. And small talk carries sharp edges. I had reserved the private dining space at Willow and Pine weeks in advance. I paid for the catering, the decor, even the floral centerpiece with the cream peonies my mom once said reminded her of spring in Michigan. I told myself it was worth it. Maybe this year we could reset something. Maybe if I planned it just right, they'd stop pretending not to see me. When I walked in, Camille was already seated, waving like she hadn't ignored my last 3 texts. Her voice carried across the room too brightly. Jonah barely looked up from his phone when he muttered happy birthday. My mom adjusted her scarf and smiled the way people do when they've made up their minds about you long ago. My dad nodded without looking up. We made it through appetizers like we always did. Polite. Clipped updates. Camille talked about her podcast. Jonah about how his landlord sucked. I didn't say much. I knew the choreography. I'd done this dance my whole life. But even then, something inside me had started to shift. Just past 6:30. The lights dimmed. A quiet clap came from near the kitchen. I looked up, expecting the cake I ordered. White buttercream. Gold trim. My name written in cursive. But instead, I saw Camille grinning behind the server, holding a cake I had never seen before. It was small, bright pink, with thick white lettering piped boldly across the top. My stomach dropped before I even read it. The words hit like a slap. Happy birthday to our biggest disappointment. There was a second one slow inhale where I thought I might be dreaming. But then Jonah burst out laughing, clapping the table with the kind of glee that only comes from cruelty dressed as comedy. My mom chuckled and looked down at her wine. Camille clapped once and said it was a joke. That word again. The one they always used like a shield. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. I just stared at the frosting while the room filled with giggles and shifting glances. I thought about the last time someone gave me a cake with my actual name on it. I couldn't remember. So I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I had gotten good at smiling when things weren't. That smile had kept the peace for decades. But in that moment, something broke. Not with a bang, but like the quiet snap of a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long. The candles were lit without asking. Camille blew them out before I could move. I excused myself with a soft apology and a hand on my phone, saying I needed to call a client. But I wasn't leaving the room to talk. I was leaving because I finally knew something for certain. This wasn't just about a cake. It never had been. This was the moment I stopped smiling just to keep the peace. I smiled because that's what they expected. Because in our family, a smile meant you were easy, pleasant, manageable. It meant you knew your role and wouldn't make things uncomfortable for everyone else. Even as I stared at the frosting, the pink too loud under the amber lights, I felt my lips curve without thinking. My hands stayed in my lap, folded like I was in church. Inside, something hollowed out. Not shock, not sadness, just that old, familiar dull ache of being the punchline. Camille was laughing. Not too hard. Not too loud. Just enough to make it clear she was proud of herself. Jonah looked at me like he was waiting for me to take the bait and throw a fit. I didn't. I never did. And they knew that. The truth is, I've been trained for this my whole life. The art of keeping the peace. I learned it early. From birthday parties where Camille got to open one of my presents so she wouldn't feel left out. From the time Jonah failed his midterms and I was told not to bring up my scholarship at dinner. From watching my mom beam at my cousins while barely glancing at me. Every moment taught me how to shrink. How to make myself less visible. Less loud. Less proud. I learned to celebrate quietly. To fold good news into safe? To stipple lines like, just doing my best. Or it's no big deal. Really? I made myself small enough to fit the version of me they could tolerate. That cake wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. A physical, frosted version of what they'd always said between the lines. I was too much. Too intense. Too different. Too unwilling to laugh at things that were meant to sting. So I played the part. Again. I smiled. I even tilted my head a little. As if amused. The way I had done at Camille's engagement dinner when she thanked everyone but me. The way I did when Jonah got a job referral through my LinkedIn and told people he earned it on his own. I had worn that expression for so long it almost felt like mine. But inside, my chest felt tight. Not from sadness. Exactly. But from the effort of pretending. From the weight of history. Of knowing that no matter how many degrees I earned, or businesses I built, I would always be the family's quiet problem. I watched as the server cut into the cake, listened to the laughter trail off into chatter about parking and weather and Camille's new recording studio. Nobody looked at me. Not really. They were too busy rehearsing the next line in their script. The one where Harper is overly sensitive. Where she always makes things dramatic. Where she doesn't know how to take a joke. I picked up my glass and took a sip I didn't need. The wine was too sweet. It stuck to my throat. I let it linger anyway. Just to have something else to focus on. Something other than the rising, crawling heat behind my sternum. I used to think I could earn their respect. That if I just did enough, gave enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually they'd see me. That if I kept absorbing their jokes, their silence, their little barbs, they'd realize I was worth more than their narratives. But sitting there, in that soft candlelight, watching them eat cake with my name nowhere on it, I knew better. They didn't see me. They saw the role I played, the one who funded the brunches, organized the birthdays, booked the hotels, and asked for nothing in return. Even Mason, who had offered to come, wasn't here. I told him it would be better if I went alone, that I could handle it, that they didn't mean harm. I realized then that I'd said those words before, over and over, like a prayer meant to protect the very people who kept setting fires behind me. I glanced at Camille. She was smiling, phone in hand, probably already planning how to make the cake a funny post. I wondered if she'd crop me out of the photo again, or if she'd just say I was being distant. Not everyone handles love the same way, she liked to say, which was her favorite way of pretending manipulation, was a language barrier. My mom raised her glass. She said something about being grateful for family. I nodded, because I knew the cues. I knew when to raise mine too. When the candles had melted halfway and someone suggested we order dessert, I pushed my chair back slowly. I apologized. Told them I needed to take a call from a client. Camille teased that I was always working. My mom murmured that it must be important. I smiled again, just enough to keep the room from noticing anything. But as I walked away, the smile faded, and I let it, because the mask was heavy. And for once, I wanted to feel how it felt to put it down, even just for a moment. I was 17 the night Camille won a school award for community outreach. We all went out to dinner afterward. A loud table of applause and proud faces. I had just gotten my early acceptance letter to Stanford that morning. But when I mentioned it, my mom said, "Not tonight, Harper. This is Camille's moment." I nodded. I smiled. I tucked that moment away like I did with all the others. There was never room for two kinds of pride at our table. Jonah failed his first college chemistry class and came home sobbing. I was told not to bring up academics around him, not to make him feel worse. He spent the summer gaming in the basement, while I worked 2 jobs and covered my own rent. When I graduated with honors, my dad joked that I should help Jonah with motivation instead of making him feel behind. It became routine. Camille's feelings needed space. Jonah's mistakes needed protection. My accomplishments needed to be quieter. Even when I got promoted to director before 30, my mom said, just don't let it make you arrogant. She said it with a smile. Like it was good advice. Like it was love. When my startup landed its first investor, I emailed the pitch deck to her with the subject line, "Thought you might be proud of this." She didn't respond. 2 days later, I found out she'd forwarded it to Camille. No message. Just the file. I told myself they were just traditional. That success made them nervous. That maybe if I made it look easier, they'd learn to celebrate with me instead of around me. But each time I pushed aside the sting, each time I swallowed the small humiliation, it added another layer. Not a wall exactly. More like glass. See-through. Fragile. Still pretending connection was possible if I just stood still long enough. At birthdays, Camille always got the spotlight. I was the planner. The one who bought the decorations, booked the restaurant, reminded everyone of the time. When it came to mine, it was last-minute calls and store-bought cake with someone else's name mispronounced on top. I stopped correcting them after a while. I became the buffer, the fixer, the one who knew how to say, it's okay even when it wasn't. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like slow water damage, the kind you don't notice until the foundation shifts. By the time I realized how much of myself I had handed over to keep things peaceful, I didn't recognize the girl in the family photos. The one smiling at the edge of the frame, always slightly turned away, always just out of focus. They told me I was too sensitive, too serious, that I remembered things wrong. But I didn't forget. I just learned to pretend I had, because in this family, remembering out loud was the real offense. It happened right after the cake had been cleared. Plates scraped clean. Wine poured again. The room trying too hard to reset. My cousin Mia leaned toward me. Her voice low. Her body angled like she was sharing something forbidden. She slid her phone under the edge of the table. Screen glowing just enough to show the text thread. I knew immediately what it was. A family group chat I had never been added to. The name at the top read Harper's birthday plan lol. My chest tightened before I read a word. The first message was from Jonah. Let's hope she doesn't make it weird tonight. Keep it light? Fam. Camille had responded with a laughing emoji. My mom had given a thumbs up. That was all. That was enough. Mia whispered that she almost didn't show me. Said she thought maybe they were just joking. That maybe I'd laugh it off, like everyone else always did. Her eyes searched mine for something. Forgiveness maybe. Permission. But I couldn't speak. My throat felt locked. My hands stayed still in my lap while my mind reeled. They hadn't just laughed at the cake. They had planned it. Together. Before the night even began. They had decided who I would be. I kept reading. Little comments. Sarcasm folded into shorthand. Camille writing bet. She'll get all serious. My mom replying, don't provoke her. Just smile and let it pass. The kind of casual cruelty that only shows up when people forget you might read it. I handed the phone back without a word. My jaw was tight. My pulse loud in my ears. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt exposed. Like I had walked into a room where everyone already knew the joke. And the punchline was me. I stared at my glass. But I couldn't see through it. I kept replaying their words. Not because they were sharp, but because they were so easy. Effortless. Like they'd been practicing for years and just never said it out loud until now. What hurt wasn't the message. It was the certainty that this wasn't new. This wasn't a glitch in the night. It was a confirmation of what I had always suspected and tried so hard to unsee. I stood up and told them I needed the restroom. My voice came out steady. My feet moved on autopilot. As I walked down the dim hallway past the bar, I felt like I was leaving something behind. But I couldn't name what yet. Inside the stall. I locked the door and leaned against it. Not to cry. Not to fall apart. Just to feel the cold surface at my back and know it was real. The text thread was still burned into my memory, their words echoing like they had finally said out loud what they had always believed. That I didn't belong. Not really. And maybe I never had. The night air felt colder than it should have. I stepped outside the restaurant and let the door fall shut behind me, muting the laughter that still spilled from the dining room. The string lights above the patio flickered gently, casting a soft glow that didn't match anything I felt. I stood there for a moment, hands tucked into my coat pockets, listening to the sounds of silverware clinking and a couple across the street arguing about something small. My phone buzzed once in my purse. I ignored it. I didn't need another fake apology or check-in from someone who had helped write the script. Instead, I pulled my phone out, opened the Notes app, and tapped the plus sign. I titled the entry, "Things I Won't Forget." My fingers hovered for a second, then started moving. Pink cake with that message. Group chat I was never in. Forwarded pitch deck to Camille. Jonah calling me dramatic before I even said a word. Mom's silence every time I tried to be seen. Camille blowing out my candles. I didn't dress it up or explain. I didn't soften the edges. I wrote each item like a bullet point. Like evidence. Like proof that what I had been feeling for years wasn't imagined. It had happened. And now, I was done minimizing it. I kept typing. Birthday text from Jonah last year that said wrong name. Mom's Christmas gift, a book on humility. Camille telling Mason I was hard to love. Each one, its own quiet betrayal. Each one something I had swallowed with a smile. The list kept growing. Not just moments. But patterns. The same script in different settings. I scrolled back up, rereading the lines. There was no heat in my chest. No fire behind my eyes. Just clarity and space. Like someone had finally opened a window inside me. For a long time, I thought boundaries meant creating distance. But in that moment, I realized they also meant documentation. Memory written down so I wouldn't keep questioning myself the next time someone tried to rewrite the story. I didn't feel powerful. Not yet. But I felt still. And that stillness wasn't emptiness. It was control. I closed the note, locked my phone, and slipped it back into my pocket. I took one slow breath and exhaled like I was setting something down I had been carrying too long. Then I turned and walked back toward the door. Not to rejoin them. Not to pretend. Just to finish the evening like I was the one in control now. Because I was, and I had the list to prove it. Back at the hotel, I kicked off my shoes and let the silence settle around me. The room was dim except for the soft glow of a floor lamp near the window. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, then opened my laptop without really thinking. The folder was still there, buried under old emails I hadn't looked at since spring. I clicked into it. The one I had labeled, "For Mom, Finance Overview." Inside were the spreadsheets, the sample investment strategy, and a mock retirement plan I had built for her last year. I remembered how proud I'd been of the models, how hopeful I was when I sent them. I checked the forward history out of habit. Her email to Camille showed up almost instantly. No message. Just the file. It had been forwarded less than 30 minutes after I sent it. I had never asked if she shared it. I just assumed if it mattered, she would have told me. I opened a new tab and searched Camille's property listings. Her beach house popped up within seconds. The date of purchase, the down payment range, even the projected rental income she boasted about online. It all lined up, almost identically, line for line, number for number. My eyes didn't widen, my breath didn't catch. I just stared at the numbers, because I knew. I had known the moment I saw her vacation post months ago. I just didn't want to believe it. She hadn't asked. She hadn't credited me. She hadn't even acknowledged the plan. She took it, called it manifesting, and built a brand around it. And Mom, she facilitated it, quietly, like it was natural, like I should have expected it. I closed the tab and leaned back. No rage. Just a cool, steady ache in my chest. I wasn't surprised. But it still hurt. Because it confirmed something that had always been there. They didn't just ignore me. They used me. And I let them. Until now, I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. Not enough to make a scene. Just enough to say I wasn't in the mood to perform. The backyard was picture perfect. With handmade table runners. A reclaimed wood table. And pastel plates arranged like a catalog spread trying too hard. Camille was the first to spot me. Her voice lifted in fake delight as she opened her arms like nothing about last night had been cruel. She said they were starting to think I went back to Seattle early. I gave her a small smile that didn't quite reach my eyes and kept walking. Jonah didn't look up from his phone. My mom offered a tight smile and said I looked tired. Like concern was her currency. I nodded. Took the last open seat wedged between Mason and my mother. And said nothing. Greg, my dad, was already halfway through his plate. Chewing, like he was somewhere else entirely. Conversation floated over the table. Light and practiced. Camille launched into an animated story about her podcast's upcoming guests. Her hands moving just enough to show off the new ring she hadn't mentioned but definitely wanted noticed. Jonah complained about his toxic boss. Said it was like working for a control freak. My mom nodded at the right times. Made small noises of agreement. Like she was listening. No one looked at me. That part was familiar. The plates were passed like clockwork. Slices of quiche. Tiny jars of jam. Rosemary potatoes arranged in careful spirals. The air smelled like toasted sourdough and something strained underneath. I kept my fork moving. Slow and steady. I didn't feel hungry. But I ate anyway. My face was still. My chest was quiet. Last night's list was tucked away in my phone. But every item lived just under the surface of my skin. During a lull, Mason leaned in. His voice was soft but clear as he told me he saw the update about the mentorship fund. He said it was huge. I turned toward him. Caught off guard. And for a second I forgot where we were. Before I could say thank you. Camille let out a brittle laugh. She said I'd always had great ideas. But execution was where things got tricky. My mom smiled into her mimosa, like it was a shared joke. Jonah chuckled, once. Already glancing back at his phone. Mason's posture shifted. He looked at my mother and said, in the same soft voice, that it wasn't funny. My mom blinked. Surprised. She asked what he meant. He said she invited me here just to say that. The table fell silent. Jonah cleared his throat. Camille's smile froze. Even Greg paused mid-chew. No one moved. No one defended her. I set my fork down beside my plate and folded my napkin, slowly. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I said what's wild is how reliable this family is. Always ready to turn a joke into a weapon, but never ready to sit with the truth. Still, no one spoke. I went on. You don't have to like me. You don't have to respect what I've done. But what you're not going to do is insult me. Dress it up in laughter. And call it love. Camille opened her mouth. Then shut it again. Even she knew better this time. I let my gaze move around the table. One face at a time. I said I'm not the version of me you still think you can control. The one who stayed quiet just to keep things easy. If you still believe I'll sit here and swallow this, try me. I pushed my chair back. Slowly. Mason stood too. Without waiting. That hit lower than any words. Judging by my mother's face, it landed exactly where it should have. She told me not to be so dramatic. I looked at her. Calm. I said I'm not being dramatic. I'm being precise. There's a difference. Then I turned and walked toward the house. Mason followed beside me. Silent. The sky overhead was pale and clear. But inside me, a storm had finally started to move. And I wasn't scared of it anymore. The restaurant was smaller this time. Less curated. More ordinary. No candles. No centerpieces. Just a long table. Plain plates. And the kind of music that filled the silence without drawing attention. Everyone was already seated when I arrived. Camille was mid-sentence, laughing softly while gesturing toward Jonah. My mom glanced up as I walked in, offered a quick smile like we were strangers passing on the street. I hung my coat neatly on the back of my chair and sat down without saying a word. Dinner started like nothing had happened. Jonah talked about a new investment he was researching. Camille shared a story about a collaboration with a wellness brand. My dad nodded occasionally, chewing slowly, like always. My mom poured more wine. No one asked how I was. I waited until the second round of entrees arrived. Until the air had settled into something comfortable again. That's when I reached into my tote and placed a small envelope in the center of the table. No one touched it. So I opened it myself. I pulled out printed pages and laid them down. One by one. Access logs, email headers, forward trails, IP addresses, device IDs. I tapped the top sheet. This one's from Jonah's laptop. This is the link Mom forwarded. And here, Camille accessed the same spreadsheet 2 days before the down payment on her beach house. Camille went pâle. Jonah shifted in his chair and reached for his glass. My mom's hand froze mid-pour. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her face said enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just kept going. You used my data. My work. My trust. Without consent. Then you sat across from me and asked if I was okay like you hadn't already crossed the line. Camille snapped that I always made everything about betrayal. That it was just information. I looked at her and said, exactly. It was mine. My mom muttered something about it being family. That family's share. I looked straight at her. No. You collect. You distribute when it suits you. Then you wrap it all in a bow labeled concern. Camille said she didn't ask for anything. I said, but you used it. And that's the difference. My voice never cracked. My hands never shook. I turned to my mom. Let me be clear. I no longer give permission for any of my personal or professional information to be shared. Verbally. Digitally. Indirectly. If it happens again, I will treat it as a breach and I will respond accordingly. Jonah scoffed. Said I was threatening legal action over dinner. I turned to him and said, I'm not threatening. I'm promising. The table went still. No one moved. No one laughed. My dad coughed into his napkin and avoided my eyes. No one defended me. But this time, no one tried to silence me either. I sat back in my chair. Quiet. The silence that followed was thick. Not with tension, but with realization. For the first time, they knew I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't asking. I was drawing a line. I didn't want revenge. I wanted boundaries. And I had just drawn them in ink they couldn't erase. It started 2 days after the dinner. Camille posted a carousel on Instagram with soft lighting and teary eyes. The caption talked about family wounds and how some people choose spectacle over healing. One photo was of us as kids. Another of a crumpled napkin from the restaurant, placed carefully beside a half-eaten slice of cake. Jonah tweeted something vague about loyalty and how not everyone deserves your silence. The replies filled up fast. Half were confused. The rest were cheering him on like he was the one betrayed. Neither of them said my name. But they didn't need to. I recognized the strategy. Keep it emotional. Keep it clean. Let the audience assume. I didn't respond right away. I watched. I took screenshots. I scrolled through comments calling Camille brave and Jonah mature. Some said I was probably unstable. Or bitter. Or jealous. Most didn't know the full story. That was the point. Camille gave an interview to a podcast host who built her brand on curated vulnerability. She spoke gently, with long pauses. Said she had always tried to support me. But I was difficult. Said the pain ran deep. But she still had hope. Said, I never let her love me properly. I watched the clip twice. Not because it hurt. Because it was so polished. She didn't lie. She just bent the truth until it fit better in her mouth. Until it became soft enough for strangers to swallow. I closed the video and opened my laptop. I didn't draft a thread. I didn't rehearse a speech. I opened a folder called Receipts. Inside were bank documents, forwarded emails, timestamp spreadsheets, and the original mentorship fund agreement with my signature and hers. Then I opened Twitter. I posted the first screenshot. My pitch deck. My subject line. Forwarded from my mom to Camille in under 30 minutes. I added a caption. Not everyone cries. Some of us build. Some of us protect quietly. Until quiet stops working. Then I posted again. Attached a redacted bank transfer. My funds used for a business Camille claims she's self-funded. A follow-up DM from her asking me to cover the deposit. Quietly. A final post with no image. Just the words. You want PR games? I brought receipts. It took 20 minutes. The first retweet came from a female founder I met at a tech conference. Then a podcaster I had turned down for an interview. Then someone I didn't know but who said they had a sister like Camille. Camille's comment section turned quickly. Someone asked if she had really funded the beach house on her own. Another asked about the mentorship fund. Someone else linked my thread. She didn't respond. Jonah posted another tweet. Said the internet loves a villain until it's their sibling. He got ratioed in under an hour. One user replied with a meme of a guy lighting a match under his own seat. Captioned, "When you gaslight the wrong sibling." My inbox filled with messages. Some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. One from a woman who said my story made her cancel Sunday dinner. One from a nonprofit asking if I'd speak at their event. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat in my hotel room, watching the tide turn. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was done letting them own the story. I had never needed their apology. I just needed them to stop pretending I was the problem. And now, they didn't get to control the narrative. I did. And I had the receipts to back it all up. I didn't respond to Camille's next post. I didn't watch the full podcast episode. I didn't open Jonah's apology text when it came through 2 days late and full of nothing. Instead, I updated the mentorship fund. I added a new line item under the grant offerings. It read, "For survivors of family gaslighting and emotional control." No press release. No newsletter. No social post. Just a quiet entry in a database I managed myself. Funded fully from my own account. I didn't need anyone to know. But I wanted it to exist. Later that afternoon, I checked the inbox attached to the fund. There was a message. No subject line. Just a single paragraph from someone I had never met. She said she left her mother's house the night before. Said my story helped her feel sane again. Said thank you. I read it twice. Then saved it in a folder. I called quietly healing. I didn't reply. I just let it sit there. Some things don't need more words. Outside. The light was soft against the hotel window. Mason had gone out for coffee. And the room was still. I sat with that stillness and didn't try to fill it. I wasn't waiting for the next fire to put out. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't searching for a way to explain myself better. The truth had been enough. The silence that followed felt less like exile and more like air. I kept checking the inbox every few days. Not for praise. Just to remind myself there were others. Women who had been made to feel like they were the problem. Who stayed too long. Questioned too much. And finally stopped apologizing. Each message was its own kind of proof. That stories, even the hard ones, make room for someone else to begin again. That I hadn't just walked away. I had cleared a path. Some of us burn everything down when we're hurt. Some of us build. Quietly. Steadily. Without needing to be seen. This part of my life didn't need noise. It just needed to be real. And it was. Finally. Seattle welcomed me back with soft rain, and the smell of wet concrete. My apartment felt exactly the way I had left it: quiet. Simple. Mina. The coat I had worn on my flight out still hung by the door, like it had been waiting for me to come home. Different. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw the subject line I'd almost forgotten. Keynote confirmed. Women in Tech Conference. Downtown. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked accept. Mason helped me run through my slides the night before the event. He offered to practice with me one last time, but I shook my head. I told him I knew exactly what I needed to say. The event space buzzed with soft voices, the hum of tech setup, the nervous energy of people about to speak into a microphone for the first time. I stood backstage, steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage without hesitation. The lights weren't too bright. The mic wasn't too loud. I looked out at a room full of women, some younger, some older, all holding stories they probably hadn't said out loud yet. I told them mine. Not the sanitized version, not the polite one. I told them about the cake, the forwarded files, the group chat. I told them about silence that isn't peace and jokes that aren't harmless. I told them about the moment I stopped trying to earn my family's approval and started reclaiming my name. I ended with this. I used to think being the black sheep meant I was lost. But sometimes the black sheep is just the one who saw the wolf first. The room went still. Then the applause rose. Not loud, but grounded. I didn't cry, but something in me softened. Like I had been holding my breath for years and finally let it go. I wasn't speaking for revenge. I was speaking for release. Backstage, someone pressed a small thank you card into my hand. It had no name on it. Just one sentence. Written in blue ink. I've never felt more seen. That was enough. I walked out of the building alone. No fanfare. The wind tugged lightly at the edge of my coat. My heels clicked against the pavement like punctuation. I didn't need to be forgiven. I had chosen freedom, and now I was living in it. If you've made it this far, thank you. I don't know where you're watching from, or what led you here, but I do know this: somewhere along the way, a lot of us were taught that peace meant keeping the people around us comfortable, even if it meant losing parts of ourselves to do it. Have you ever chosen peace over people? Not the real kind of peace, but the version that keeps everyone else happy while your stomach twists into knots. If you have, I want you to know you're not alone. I spent years thinking that if I was good enough, kind enough, quiet enough, I'd finally be easy to love. I thought if I could just explain myself better, if I could be less sensitive, maybe they'd see me clearly. But here's the thing. Some people will never understand you because your truth makes their version of the story fall apart. And that's not your job to fix. You don't have to stay small to keep the peace. You don't have to carry their comfort at the cost of your own clarity. You don't have to prove your heart just because someone else pretended not to see it. I'm not here to tell you to burn bridges. I'm just here to remind you that walking away doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes walking away is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. Sometimes it's the only thing. So I want to ask you something. What would you say to the version of you that stayed silent for too long? What would you whisper to the person you were before you started choosing yourself? If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. If you've got a story like mine, I hope you'll share it. Even just a piece. Someone else might need it. And if you didn't connect with this, that's okay too. I'm glad you stayed long enough to hear it. This space is for real stories, real voices, real healing. And if you're still figuring out how to take that first step, just know your silence doesn't make you weak, and your truth doesn't make you difficult. Until next time, take care of your peace. It matters more than they ever taught you, and you deserve to protect it.